This is the Elevate Construction Podcast, delivering remarkable content for workers, leaders, and companies in construction wanting to take their next step. Get ready to step out of your comfort zone with Jason Schroeder as he encourages you to do better, live a remarkable life, and expect more. Let's go.
Welcome to the Elevate Construction Podcast, where we deliver experience that will help workers, companies, and the industry as a whole elevate their performance to the delight of customers. I'm Jason Schroeder, and today's podcast is about how a focus on quality can be a method for you to run your project. So, as we begin, please consider leaving a comment and rating this podcast. Also, please share this with somebody who needs the content. Here's why you'll want to listen today. Have you ever found it difficult to implement quality on your project? Have you ever found it difficult to get it all the way to the worker? Have you had situations where there's a quality process, but it just seems to be this separate kind of disconnected thing? Have you ever been in a situation where you want people to just catch the vision with this and to deliver a quality product, but you just don't seem to have the buy-in of your team? Well, if any of these things sound like they apply to you or to your circumstances, then you'll want to listen today. We have some really good answers for you. So the information today might seem just a little bit technical and a little bit complicated, but it's good information. I'll keep it as high level as I absolutely can, but it's really fantastic if you're able to implement it this way. I've had good success with it. And if you ever need any support, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn or call me. So let me start out with a quote. Quality is never an accident. It is always the result of high intention, sincere effort, intelligent direction, and skillful execution. It represents the wise choice of many alternatives. And that's by William A. Foster. Let me read that to you again because it's pregnant with meaning, meaning every word, every sentence has meaning that will apply to us today. And I'll come back to this quote throughout the podcast so that we can anchor it in the meaning that's contained therein. Quality is never an accident. It is always the result of high intention, sincere effort, intelligent direction, and skillful execution. It represents the wise choice of many alternatives. I do want to say that in our industry, sometimes people hope that quality will go well. We run off of the engine of wishful thinking instead of intentional direction, high intention, and sincere effort. So I love that this quote starts out with the fact that you just can't do that. The second part of it, it is always the result of high intention, meaning we have to have really high intentions. We have to have high expectations when it comes to quality. And I like that. That's step one. Then sincere effort, meaning it can't just be a box that we check. It can't just be this thing that we go do because we feel like we have to. It can't be forced. It can't be coerced. And then intelligent direction and skillful execution. That means it's a process. That means we have to work at it. That means that there has to be somebody behind it, pushing it, and making it all work. And then again, it represents the choice of many alternatives, the wise choice of many alternatives. So I absolutely love that quote. Let me start you out with a story that was very impactful to me. One time I was doing consulting for a project specifically for field engineers in Southern California. In fact, we were down there on the base halfway between San Diego and Los Angeles. And I observed a project superintendent do a fantastic thing. In that example, he was following a quality process which was pretty detailed and pretty standardized at the company that he worked for. And I noticed that that was the method that he used to run the job. Sometimes I would go to projects and see the project superintendent manage by doing field walks or manage by meetings or manage, in their own way with some kind of a mix in between. Sometimes I would see superintendents that like to be in the field, some that like to be in the office, like just different flavors here and there on how they like to run their jobs. And you could kind of tell their style after the first couple of hours, the first days, and you would say, oh, that's their system. That's what they use. They either use the schedule to trigger them to do certain things, or they use their field walks to trigger them to do certain things, or they, are behind the eight ball and they have the people in the field come and ask them questions and that triggered them to do certain things. But this superintendent was different. He followed the quality process really to run his project. So as soon as there were contracts in place for the trade partners on site, then he would do a pre-mobilization meeting, meaning would sit down with that contractor and say, well, these are the things that I'm going to need in a couple of months before you start. And then before they started, and after they were able to get all of those deliverables, they would have a meeting to prepare the work. A pre-construction meeting is typically what the owners call it, and he would get the foreman, the superintendents in that company up to speed. And then as soon as they started their work and they did their first in place and they did their first in place inspection, then they would go out and improve that mock-up, that first in place, and make sure that they were ready to go. And then he would regiment follow-up inspections and then close out inspections, and it was pretty fantastic. Every scope that came on site knew that they would get a pre-mobilization meeting, a pre-construction meeting, that they would get an initial inspection, follow-up inspections, and then that he would close out that process and make sure that any change orders were reconciled and that the contractor was ready to demobilize the site. And he was in quite a few meetings and interacting quite a bit, but that was the way that he ran the project through that system, through that structure, through that backbone. And it was pretty fantastic. I remember that superintendent was pretty new as a lead superintendent, and within a couple of years, he was promoted to general superintendent because his projects were always run well. They finished on time, they finished under budget, and he was absolutely fantastic in using this system. So the story stuck out to me because I had never seen quality be used as a system. And quality can be used as a system, as a management approach, as a method to deliver a project as the primary focus. And remember that quality and safety tie together. So this superintendent was very focused on quality and safety, and those two things were always done well. And when you focus on quality and safety, then you obviously get cost and you get schedule because you don't have to do rework. Because if we can't build it right the first time, we don't have time to build it twice. So here are some principles. Quality really is about focus. I think a lot of times on our projects, it's this ancillary kind of secondary thing. It's on this separate Excel spreadsheet somewhere. It's on this log that people don't pay attention to or care about. It's, this thing that the directors and executives and general superintendents have to remind the team to do. Hey, don't forget to go do this quality. Don't forget to go do this inspection. And that's just not the right way. If you see that quality is on a separate log, on a separate sheet, on a separate process, or it's just delegated to one person, or you have to remind people to go do it, then quality probably isn't as integrated into your processes as you may like. I remember my grandpa used to say, there has to be someone there pushing it. I get it, but it has to be a team ordeal. And so if you don't have somebody on your project that's really making it a focus, that's red flag number one. And if everyone's not involved, that's red flag number two. And again, like I said, if it's some separate, disconnected part of the process, that's red flag number three. In construction, we have great processes, but it has to get to the worker. That's the other principle that I want to get across here is that I see these companies, company number one, hey, has this 6-step process. Company number two has a 3-step process. Company number three has this 5-step process, and it's all detailed out. And they take it to the interviews and show customers, and people are like, ooh, oh, that's fantastic. And, it's written up on the wall and it's detailed on the poster boards. But that process is sparsely implemented and it doesn't get down to the worker, meaning the checklist and the outcome don't get down to the worker. And what I mean by the companies have a pretty good process, I'm usually talking about after scopes are bought out, meaning a contract is in place. There's usually a part of the process that gets that trade partner up to speed with the expectations of the project and asks for certain deliverables. Almost every quality process has a system of a pre-construction meeting where before you go to work, you have a meeting with the owner, the inspectors, the engineers perhaps, but especially the superintendent and the foreman to explain expectations. Almost every company out there has an initial inspection or a first in place or a first in place mock-up requirement to go out and look at a representative sample of work before they continue going, before the crew continues to work in that fashion. Some companies have follow-up inspections and some companies have closeout procedures, but this is typically the backbone of that process. And sometimes they'll add in, pre-bid requirements with the trade partners, pre-bid quality requirements along that process. But basically, it usually follows, what do you do after the contract? What do you do before they go to work? What do you do for the first portion of the work? What do you do to follow up? And then what do you do to close out? This is fantastic to have this process in place. But my question would be, and I think would be super important in this podcast, is what will we do to get that information to the worker? Will that be in form of a checklist? How often will they get it? How will they continually know the expectations? How will they know the expectations when the crew changes, when the foreman changes? And will it be written in a checklist form or will it be visual? And I would always advocate the visual part. And so whatever system that we have, we really need to make sure that we are aligning all of our systems together, preparing the work, informing the last planners and the workers what the expectations are, establish those clear expectations, and follow up continually. And let me go back to the quote in the beginning, is that quality is never an accident. It is always the result of high intention, sincere effort, intelligent direction, and skillful execution. It represents the wise choice of many alternatives. So what is our solution? The solution really is to integrate our systems. And let me give you a couple of hints that I feel like will be very helpful to you when executing quality. And then there's a couple of key points where I really want to get excited and explain it in a very articulate way so that you can take that back and execute that on your project. So, one solution is to have a buyout log. Now, this is not earth shattering information. Whatever you call it, you can call it trade partner procurement log, you can call it a buyout log, you can call it whatever you want. But in your process, there has to be something that triggers you once you execute a contract to then make sure that their safety requirements are up to par, that they are qualified from a safety standpoint, that they don't need any corrective action plans, that they then have been informed with a pre-mobilization meeting or pre-mobilization requirements, that you have then scheduled their pre-construction meeting, and that they are compliant with certain things like, have you submitted your quality plan? Have you submitted your safety plan? Do you have all JHAs prepared for the work? Basically, some sort of log to track whatever process that you are following and make sure that those are date sensitive, time sensitive, and that you can bring that up in a team meeting whenever you need to. You have to know, and your project executive or your project director should be able to come help you with that buyout log to make sure that you are on track, on process, and that we have all of those deliverables. Because when OSHA comes on site, they're going to want to see the trade partner's safety plan. When you are on site, they have to have insurance. They have to have their bonds in place. They have to have certain key things ready to go for them to go execute a quality process, quality work. Okay. The other thing I would suggest is make sure to outline your quality process. The quality process that I'm used to, that I prefer when I'm on projects, that has been adapted from numerous different quality processes that I've seen from companies or from the Corps of Engineers or from certain trainings, is namely this. Step number one, once the contract is in place, make sure that you explain either in a meeting or by email the expectations and deliverables for that trade partner so that they can be successful by the time you do a pre-construction meeting. Then have an effective pre-construction meeting that is prepared for, where you have all of the prescriptive and proscriptive information, the information detailing out what the owner and architects expect, where you can sit down with all of the key stakeholders and especially the trade partners, foreman and superintendent, and outline what a quality install looks like, and in that meeting, where you can leave with a checklist or what I call a visual feature of work board that will educate the crews in the field on what they need to do. The second thing are first in place mock-ups or first in place or initial inspections. Make sure that you take a representative sample of the work in the field with that crew and say, all right, stop. Let's use this checklist to install this work. Let's do this work according to the pre-construction meeting, and let's stop and go do an inspection with the group and make sure that we are on the right track. Then somehow use a method of follow-up and then a method to close them out. And when I say close them out, do not let trade partners leave your site until they have gone through and reconciled all the change orders, completed any of your punch list or incomplete work lists. Make sure that they are 100% on board with the expectations before they demobilize the site. That is the general quality process that I like to follow. And I'll go through a couple of nuances a little bit later and repeat myself just so that we can get a little bit of muscle memory with this. Okay. I would recommend, as a solution, that you follow the process to run the job. Now, here are the couple of key things that I really want you to pay attention to in this podcast. Number one, pulling quality in as the main focus of your team meeting is absolutely fantastic. I was taught this by one of the best project managers that I ever worked with down in Tucson, Arizona. Absolutely love this guy. He is quality focused and the idea is fantastic. And we worked on it, the implementation together, and it worked so well that I would recommend it to anybody. Use your quality process as the backbone of your team meeting. Now, absolutely in your team meeting, you're going to start out with teaming items as a backbone of your team meeting. You're going to do, team health. You're going to talk about finances. You're going to talk about PTO. You're going to talk about schedule and all of these other things. But your team meeting could, and I would recommend that the bulk of it is the outline of a quality process, and it comes in the form of a point of release diagram, chart, or Excel sheet. So here's how it works. In your team meeting, your agenda has the backbone of a point of release chart. A point of release means that there's some sort of step, there's a confirmation, there's a sign off before you can release it to the next step. And that's how we do it with the quality process. So in your team meeting, your main focus has to be, all right, what trade partners are needed up next according to the schedule? And let's go ahead and make sure that contracts will be in place by that time. Which trade partners will need a pre-mobilization meeting and who's assigned to do that? Next step, we're going to make sure that that's done. Release it. Next step, who's going to prepare the pre-construction meeting and make sure that we've reviewed the specs, we've reviewed the submittals, that we've reviewed any, code requirements, that we have gone through company historical checklists, that we've compiled all of that stuff, compiled stuff from our safety manual, from our quality manual, and we have that all packaged ready together. Okay, when that's done, release it to the next step. When is the pre-construction meeting scheduled? Okay, do we have that meeting fully executed with the superintendent foreman? Okay, done. Release it to the next step. Who and when will oversee the first in place inspection, the first in place mock-up, or the initial inspection, whatever you call it, and make sure that we're 100% signed off before we allow the crew to go? All right, good point of release. Now it needs to go into the next step. Within 6 weeks, 8 weeks, a month, whatever, has that contractor had a follow-up inspection from a part of the management team? Okay, point of release, then it goes into the next time period. All right, now we're done with all follow-up inspections. Have we done an incomplete work list? Have we punched them as we go? And are they ready to be closed out? And so once they're down to the closeout, change orders reconciled, we have their punch list 100% complete. Any of their major items that needed to be inspected to release it to the next contractors on site, that is complete. All right, point of release. Now that scope of work is done. So we really need to have that be the bulk of the team meeting in order for this to work, because you can run a project that way. It will trigger you to know when you need JHAs. It will trigger you to know when you need safety compliance. It will trigger you to know when you need procurement, when you need materials, when you need. If you follow that backbone, that quality backbone, you will be successful. So whatever that looks like, if that's in Procore, CMIC, Prolog, whatever, wherever that is, that agenda has to be built with a point of release chart within it. I personally have been very successful using OneNote and then having your table inside OneNote have that point of release within it. But it has to be an interactive system with your team members that can be used to make sure that every trade is following through that process. And that most importantly, you have a checklist as a result or a visual feature of workboard as a result that can be with the crew and make sure that they understand expectations the entire time. Again, it has to be a focus in the team meeting. It has to engage the entire team, and everybody needs assignments, and it has to be there. If it's not in the team meeting, it might be this separate Excel document. It might just be the quality manager. It might just be this person that you've designated. But if it's a part of this entire team meeting, it will absolutely be fantastic. The other thing I want to make sure that we're clear about is that I tell project engineers and project managers and anybody in the field, We do not supervise tools. Sometimes when we talk to a project engineer, for example, and we ask them, what do you do? Well, I'm doing RFIs and I'm doing submittals, and I'm processing change orders. Well, that would be just like if you asked a worker, what do they do? And they said, well, I deal with shovels on site and I deal with my margin trowel, and sometimes I deal with a bull float. That's what I do on site. What does that mean? We're not talking about the tools that we're using. What are you doing? I'm finishing concrete. I'm excavating. I'm digging footings for the project. What should you get when you ask a project engineer what they do? I help trade partners, or I make sure trade partners are successful from buyout all the way to construction to closeout. I supervise scopes from start to finish. I answer their questions. I make sure that procurement is here on time for them so that the supply chain is effective enough to where there is no waste or variation in the process of that trade partner installing work. Those are the kinds of answers that we should be getting as we ask people what they do. We do not supervise tools, we supervise scopes. The other principle that I want to bring forward is that checklists and visuals are the key. If we don't leave these pre-construction meetings with a really good checklist that everybody can see and use, not some hidden checklist on our project management software that nobody can see, but checklists that everybody can see and use, and visual feature of workboards that have pictures, bullet lists, instructions, key things to watch out for, safety requirements, or, like I said, that visual. If we do not leave those meetings and go attend these first in place mockups with the proper checklists and visuals, then we are going to be in trouble, because the goal is to get things down to the worker, or up to the worker, however you want to say it, over to the worker, to the end of the row. The other thing is we have to have quality at the source. I've talked before in podcasts about andon cords or andon buttons. Those are tools in Japanese lean manufacturing that they can pull or push that will stop the line, that will stop the flow of work. We have to enable our foremen and our workers to pull that andon cord or hit that button to stop work. So the motto on your project should be quality at the source. And in your orientation and in your morning huddles and in your pre-construction meetings, you need to make it clear that if something is wrong, we fix it right then and there. If there's a column that we place wrong, we tear it out right away and we fix it right there. If there's something wrong in the installation, we have to stop, enable everyone to stop, make sure that we have quality at the source, and we fix it as we go. If we do not fix problems as we go, then we do not have a quality system that is working. We have to establish quality at the source and do whatever we can to make sure that anybody can stop the production of work, fix the problems as they go, and that we're disciplined enough to do that. The other thing is finish as you go. I advocate lean flow systems on site, meaning I think most superintendents on site in the construction industry will say, everybody get going as fast as you can, fast as you can, so that we have a month or 2 months or 3 months at the end of the job where we can go fix everything and do punch list work. I don't believe in that. I believe we should run everybody into a flow, a little bit of a buffer at the end, whatever you appropriately need, but you need to punch work as you go. Meaning for me, punch list starts like month 3. It starts month 2. It starts right away. It starts as soon as you have work that you need to inspect to make sure it has a good substrate for the work following behind. And make sure that you have those lists, make sure you have those incomplete work lists or those punch lists, and make sure that your contractors are finishing as they go. And actually tie that to their grading system, tie that to their contracts, tie that to their monthly payments. You have to make sure that you are closing work out as you go. Here are a couple of concepts before I leave. Field engineers. I've built projects with field engineers and I've built them without. It was an absolutely just disgusting, horrible, gut-wrenching nightmare to build a project without field engineers, without people that can go be runners for the superintendent, that can go be quality people in the field to make sure that we're following up on quality inspections, working with crews, installing the way we need to, and make sure that we have the right dimensional layout, quality control for the things on site. I hate to admit this, but you will spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in contractor contingency if you don't just go ahead and pay for field engineers up front with your GCs. We need to have people out there that will be the eyes and ears of the superintendent, the project manager, with the project engineers that will make sure that quality work is going in consistently. That can be those eyes and the ears, that can be the runners for the superintendent, that can be a help to make sure that work is going in properly with the assistant superintendents and anyone else on site. I will do a podcast about field engineers in the future, but if you're curious at all what that means, please reach out to me. Field engineers make such a big difference with quality control. In fact, where contractors do not use field engineers, I constantly get the feedback from owners when talking to them, not by me bringing it up, but just by being in the area and then bringing it up. There's like, well, I really like this contractor, but they don't use field engineers. And there's such a huge difference between the quality and the field. You don't want that happening. You need to look at whether or not your company, your system, your crew, your job site will have field engineers and then understand how to train them. I'm almost done with the solution here. And I want to tie it all back together. So one really good practice that people will do on their sites will be to do scope reviews and area reviews. You need to do scope reviews. Like if you're installing curtain wall, you should have a checklist that helps you to make sure that you're installing that curtain wall by unit or as they stick build it correctly. Okay. That's a scope review. The other thing is you need to institutionalize on your project area reviews, meaning it's fine to do curtain wall, but what about where the curtain wall interfaces with brick? What about where it interfaces with metal panels? You need to do area reviews for your high risk areas, your high risk scopes. You need to do area reviews by elevation or by floor or by modality or by room or whatever, by critical area, for the lobby, for this lab area, for the exterior, for this terrace area. You need to do quality area reviews where you really look at good interfaces. I heard a quote, and I don't know who to attribute this to, so I apologize, but I remember it from a DBIA training that buildings leak at the intersection of contracts. I've always remembered that and think that's a fantastic quote. So not only do we have to make sure that quality is going in for the scopes, but it needs to go in for areas, and we have to have the right intersection and the right interfaces. So let me just briefly go over what this would look like if this entire system was implemented properly. Okay, number one, you have field engineers that are there to help you with the assistant superintendents to make sure that your quality process is going in right. The vision for your entire quality process is to get the information to the worker. It's a complete waste of time if you don't. It needs to get there as a visual feature of workboard or checklist, or somehow it needs to get to the worker, because quality, if you had to define what quality is, it's does the foreman and the worker understand the quality expectations, and do they consistently implement that with the right supervision and checks? Okay, so getting it to the worker is your primary focus. You have a quality process where after you buy out that trade partner, that you give them clear expectations in a meeting, phone call, or in an email. Then they come to the site with the pre-construction meeting and everyone's ready. The trade partner has read the plans and the specs. They have the submittals ready. The RFIs are answered up to that point. They have the people that will actually be, doing that work. Their JHAs are ready. Everything's ready to review. And if you don't have those things, those critical components, you cancel the meeting and you schedule it for the next week once they do what they need to do and they get the right people there, and then you go do the work. After that meeting, you have a process to make sure that that gets onto a checklist or a visual feature of workboard. You allow that contractor to go install their first representative sample of work, and you do an inspection to make sure they're on the right track. And then as you go, as a part of their pre-task plan, they also have quality in addition to safety. They have quality sections with their checklists or with their visual feature of workboards that they can use daily to make sure that they're still following standards and that they're continuously improving. So there's a way, there's a system, there's a schedule to track follow-up inspections, and then you close it out properly. You punch as you go, you make that contractor finish as they go. They make sure that their substrate for other contractors is good as they go. You reconcile change orders, you reconcile any outstanding work, you make sure they complete before that crew demobilizes the site. Now this for quality, let me get to the point where I really want everyone to get the vision of this. Probably everything I just said is like, well, that's super interesting, Jason. And I've seen those systems before and I like that. Here's where what I'm talking about is quite a bit different and where you should get excited. The entire quality process is managed by the project team in the team meeting as the primary focus, along with safety and team health. That's what I'm talking about. Coming up with a point of release chart where everybody sees trades going through this system, this point of release system, these different milestones, these key points along the process, and somebody is assigned, and we know when it's going to happen, and that's how you manage your project. And when you come to a team meeting, you know you're going to be asked, are you ready for that pre-construction meeting? Have you done that follow-up inspection? Have you done the research to even schedule the pre-construction meeting? We have a contract for this trade already. Who has gone through and told them what we expect in 3 months when they come on site? What contracts need to be bought out by when? And you have a beautiful, like, effective buyout log that keeps track of this entire process. So we're never missing insurance, bonds, pre-qualifications, safety plans, quality plans, and the whole nine. Okay. That is remarkable. If you catch that vision, then you're going to be jamming. But if you don't get that vision, if you're like, I don't know what he's saying on this, then please reach out to me. Or, I guess you can let it go. But if you do this, I promise you, quality and safety will take a step in the right direction on your project, and you will start to get it. You have to make it a part, the main part of your team meeting, and manage it. It cannot be a separate Excel sheet, a separate process, or just one designated person. Okay? It cannot be that. The other remarkable thing I want to catch in this podcast and give a vision of, and hopefully I can be as excited as I need to be here, is could you imagine if every crew on site had a visual feature of work board that was on a 18 by 24 that explained every day in color, or black and white, whatever, but in large enough text to where people could visually see what they were building. We have to remember that there are people in this industry that are visual learners, auditory learners, or kinesthetic learners, meaning that they like to touch and experience things. And most people are visual learners. And yet we talk so much, like I'm talking in this podcast, or we give people things in writing. Do we really think that we're going to give to a bunch of skilled craft a bunch of words, either in English or in Spanish, these long paragraphs to go read and understand what they're going to build when they're visual learners? I mean, if I saw a 2 or 3 paragraph checklist, I'm gonna fall asleep. Like I'm like, I ain't reading that. Like, so I even get, if I get to an email that's too long, long-winded and wordy, I'm like, oh, I need to take a break and like go get a snack before I read that thing. Like that is like too much. And I remember the old adage that, if I had more time, I would have written you a shorter letter. I think the same thing applies in construction. If I had more time, I would have given you a quality checklist that was visual. I would have given you a more condensed quality checklist that you could understand. I would have printed this in large size so you and your crew can understand it and make sure that every day that you're using it. When I mean understand it, I mean get the information from the paper to the person. I'm not talking about intelligence. I'm talking about capacity to transfer information. And doing it just in written words is not going to get it done. We need visuals. We need to condense things. We need to have it in English and in Spanish. We need every worker understanding quickly what the expectations are on a continual basis. Could you imagine a project where we found a way to get every crew on site a nicely sized, nicely done feature of work board that clearly communicated how they were supposed to install that scope of work that the foreman and crews were held accountable to using? Could you imagine if that was done? Could you imagine if that was done with proper research and that the owner's expectations, the designer's expectations, the plan and spec expectations, your expectations as a company were all in that feature of work board? Could you imagine if everything in that feature of workboard was actually distilled from the project team by consensus, and that if you implemented that, everybody's needs would be met? Could you imagine being able to walk up to a crew and have a dialogue and say, how are things going? Any improvements needed based on this feature of workboard? Could you imagine if that was the end state? And then think to yourself, right now as I'm talking, do you think that it's impossible? Well, doing submittals for every scope of work one time in our history was probably considered impossible. Doing the quality process at all was probably considered impossible. Heck, hand wash stations for workers for bathrooms were 15 years ago considered unnecessary and probably impossible. Why can't we get to a point where the end product of everything that we have is a visual feature of workboard or a visual checklist that the crew can use daily to install their work? I think that would be remarkable. So here's the challenge. Find out how to deliver quality on your site. because the ultimate answer is that the foreman and superintendent and the workers need to know expectations, and there has to be somebody or a system of somebody's holding them accountable to do that daily. That's it. That's the answer of how to deliver quality. And I think sometimes when we do these quality processes, we've got the first 60, 70, 80% of the process, but we forget the latter end of the process, the last part of it, which is how do we get it to the worker? And if we have just a fanatical, crazy, dedicated approach to say, I want this information to the worker, I think that will become a customer, that will become a vacuum, that will become a magnet to pull this information through your quality process to the rightful owner, which are the people installing it in the field in the right format where they can understand. I have this saying that it needs to be as addictive as Facebook and as fast as Wikipedia. If your system isn't as addictive as Facebook and as quick as Wikipedia, then we have work to do. Meaning it can't be hidden on some project management software. It can't be this, crazy complex process within the software to go do these checklists and do these inspections. It can't be this hidden information that's stuck in iPads that's only there. It can't be this hard to understand, like 2, 3, 4, 5 page requirement. It has to be as addictive as Facebook and as quick as Wikipedia. You need the information accessible to everybody, quick, fast, looking nice, in the format that the crew can be addicted to, where it's helpful and useful. And that's how we need to get the information to our people. That's how you deliver quality, is you look at systems that work. Why do video games have us addicted? Why does Facebook have us addicted? Why does YouTube have us addicted? Why is Wikipedia our preferred source instead of going to a library? Because it's fast, and because it appeals to us, and because it's visual, and because it tailors to those things that our brains are addicted to do. Let's get that delivered in a way to our workers to where they will understand quality expectations in a similar way. So here are some tips and tricks. Make it a team effort. Make a point of release chart. Make sure that you get information down to the worker or up to the worker, however you want to say it, or to the end of the road to the worker. Make sure that you are using that quality system as a process to run your job, as the vehicle through which you run that job. Always connect quality and safety together as your first priorities. Okay. Build a structure. Don't make something separate. If you have a designated person for quality, red flag. Quality manager, red flag. If you don't have quality as a part of your team meetings, red flag. You don't have field engineers, red flag. You don't have a good way of getting it to the workers, red flag. You don't know what the owner and the architect want in their specific areas, and that's not communicated over to the workers, red flag. If PEs think that they're managing tools and not scopes, red flag. So we have to make sure that we integrate this entire thing. It's all about integrated systems, integrated visuals, integrated expectations, integrated teams, integrated delivery, integrated system, integrated approach. Everything with quality has to be integrated. That is the key, and then you will succeed. So let's go back up to the quote. Quality is never an accident. It is always the result of high intention, sincere effort, intelligent direction, and skillful execution. It represents the wise choice of many alternatives. Okay, so quality will not be an accident, or if you think it will come accidentally or by happenstance, you will have an accident. It is always the result of high intention. Again, make it a team meeting focus, sincere effort. Make sure you and your team care about it, that you're not just checking the box. Intelligent direction. Okay, make sure that your process is working and that's the vehicle that you're using to deliver your project. Skillful execution. Get that onto a good checklist or a visual feature of workboard to the superintendent and to the workers. And it represents the wise choice of many alternatives, meaning that you have on that feature of workboard, on that checklist, on that outcome, in that mock-up, that you have 100% distilled down the wise choices of the entire team that represent what the owner wants, what the architect wants, what you want within your company, and what the plans and specs dictate. So this is a high level of quality. Please reach out to me if you want any suggestions for process. If you want any checklists, I would never transfer anything that I've learned by intellectual property from other companies, but I can tell you over the years what I've learned and distilled down. I can help you with any part of this process, with field engineering, with the feature of workboards, with the visuals, with the process, with how to run it in the meeting. Please let me know if you need anything like that, if you need sample agendas. Reach out to me on LinkedIn if you want any of that content, or if you want to do an interview, or if you want to give me feedback or give me a topic that you want to hear about in the future. But the bottom line is quality can be this amazing, wonderful, beautiful thing on site if it's a focus and if it's not something separate, if it's not ancillary. Okay. And so the vision for this is that you have remarkable quality. The vision for this is that you're delighted in how you run the job. The vision for this is that the entire team is bought in. And the vision for this is that everybody understands. And if we do this, we will create such a better environment for our workers, for the people in the field, for our customers in this industry, and we will elevate construction. Can you imagine how frustrating it is for owners to take over buildings that aren't up to their quality standards, to take over buildings that have maintenance problems, for workers to go do work and then have to rip it out, for people to know that they're building substandard quality work? Do you know how much money it costs when people start to lose faith in the process? Do you know how much money it costs to maintain a building when it's not built right? I mean, we have to get this reined in. We have to get buildings put in right the first time, quality as we go, fix problems as we go, understand that we'll have problems, bring those problems to the surface, and make sure that we're addressing them before we get too far in the process. Make sure that it's a primary focus. And the last thing I'll leave you with is that an owner, a superintendent, or anybody, consultant, whoever you want to say, can tell immediately if quality and safety are one of your main focuses. And so if you can't sit here and think, yes, anybody could tell it's my main focus, then we have work to do. We have a gap that we need to close, and we have efforts that we can go implement to make a difference here. And that's exciting. Could you imagine a world where we never progress, we never learn, we never conquer another hill? That would be my personal hell. So if we have a work to do, if we have great things to achieve, if we have our next mountain to climb, man, that's exciting. Let's go do it with quality and make a difference. On we go.
Please join us next time in elevating the entire construction experience for workers, leaders, and companies coast to coast. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to share with your construction colleagues and help us spread the word by rating, subscribing, and leaving a review on your preferred podcast listening platform. We really appreciate it. We'll catch you next time on the Elevate Construction Podcast.